So let's skip the intro and go straight to my passive skill tree. Starting as a witch, I went for spell damage in the beginning. You can take the cast speed if you want even more cast speed. I have Occultist Dominion, then I went for Firewalker. After that I took Heart and Soul, then Deep Wisdom. After that I took Blast Radius. I went up here, and you can take this Eula Socket early on, and if you do, try to get a Eula Socket which have cast speed and life, and some spell damage is good as well. I have Deep Thoughts, I have Cool Perception, then I went up to take Heart of Flame. You can take Breath of Flame in early game if you want, but I first went for Heart of Flame, but you can take both anyway. I have Elemental Overload, so when I crit, which is not that often, but when I crit I do 4% extra damage, which is quite nice. I went down for Quick Recovery, and I have another Eula Socket here, and again the same thing. This one don't have life, but I have a lot of damage, and I have fire damage and spell damage and cast speed of this one. You don't have to have an exactly the same. I have Explosive Impact, Purity of Flesh, and I have Serenity. Then I went down to the Temple area. I have Faith and Steel, I took that later in the game. I have Celestial Judgment for some nice fire penetration and some elemental damage. And I also have Celestial Punishment, because I pretty much always have ignited enemies, which will make this do even more damage to enemies. Also increases my chance to shock and ignite, and increases my burning damage, which is quite nice. I went for another Eula Socket here. This one have cast speed when dual wielding, life, some more cast speed. I have Light of Divinity, Elementalist, Amplify, Retribution, Discipline Training, Century, some nice mana and life regeneration notes here. I have Combat Stamina, another Eula Socket here, again cast speed and life on this one. I have Shaper for some nice mana regeneration and life regeneration. And I have the big life wheel here. And that's pretty much my normal skill tree. If you have any questions about my normal skill tree, feel free to ask me in the comments. So let's take a look at my Ascendancy Tree. The first thing I took when I ascended was a Program of Calamity. This one gives you elemental damage leech, which is very good to have. But the most important thing, you are immune to reflect damage from element damage. So you can do whatever reflect maps you want, it doesn't matter. And if you are hit by an element, you get 4% increased damage of that element. So if you get hit by fire damage, you get 4% increased fire damage. And you take less damage from that, so it's a very good note. Then I went for Pen of Destruction, which are either it give you 75% increased AoE, or it give you 75% increased element damage, and that's just going, so first 5 seconds with increased AoE, then 5 seconds increased damage, then AoE, then damage, yeah, you get the point. And then I have Masterman of Discord, and this one let you, when you use your Herald of Ash, this one let your fire damage penetrate 25% of enemies' fire resistance. It also increases the effects of your Herald and reduces the mana restoration of Heralds. So this one is really good. After that, I took Lion Primordial to have my trusty golems here. So I use both a Summoning Flame Golem and a Summoning Lightning Golem, which will increase my damage and cast speed. They die here and there occasionally, but they are more here to boost my damage and be in the way for the enemy's attacks. So that's my skill tree. If you have any questions about that, feel free to ask in the comments. I forgot to mention the Pantheon and the Bandits. When it comes to the Bandits, just kill all of them and take the 2 passive skill points. And when it comes to the Pantheon, I just went for Soul of Solaris and a Soul of Tukahama to get additional physical protection. So let's take a look at my items. I can start by talking about my weapons. I'm currently dual wielding 2 wands. And with a 1-3 weapon, you want as good as you can get fire spell damage, be it increased spell damage, increased fire damage, or increased elemental damage. Then you're gonna have as good as you can get cast speed, and also some added fire damage to spells is really nice. And if you can, try to have some fire damage listed as life, but that's not a must-have. And this build is not limited to dual wielding 2-1s. You can use a two-handed staff, and you can use a shield as well. For my helmet, I'm using this helmet here, and try to get a highly defensive helmet, try to get some good life on it, and the resistance you might need, and as good as you can get armor. For my chest armor, I'm just using this 6-linked armor here. It was a very cheap armor, it just cost me 30 chaos. For your armor, you want as good as you can get life and the resistance you might need. A good alternative to this armor would be to use Carcass Yak. You can see it on screen right now, but it can be a little bit hard to roll this color setup on that one. And if you decide to use a two-handed staff, you can use a Calm's Heart. You can see it on screen as well, which have no sockets but a metric ass ton of life and also some increased fire damage, which is quite nice. For my rings and amulets, try to get as good as you can get life and resistance you might need. And after that, if you can afford it, try to get some cast speed or spell damage as well. For my rings, again, life and resistance is the most important thing, but if you can afford it, try to get some damage there as well, be it increased fire damage, or increased cast speed, or increased elemental damage, if you can get an opal ring. For my gloves, again, defensive gloves, as good as you can get life and armor and the resistance you might need. For my belt, just get a highly defensive belt which has high life as possible and the resistance you might need. And same thing with your boost. As good as you can get life and some movement speed and the resistance if you need any. Flask, just using one anti-freeze flask, very important to have. One, remove bleeding, even more important to have. Another, remove bleeding flask, a salt flask. I'm using a Serious Promise, not a must-have, but a really nice damage boost. And I'm using Amplified Quicksilver Flask, because I just love Quicksilver Flask and running around fast. And that's pretty much my gear. If you have any questions about my gear, feel free to ask me in the comments. So let's take a look at my skill gems and support gems. I'm gonna start with a main damage setup, which of course are Incinerate. And Incinerate are supported by Control Destruction, Immolate, Faster Casting, Combustion, and Fire Penetration. Due to having such a high amount of fire penetration, it doesn't matter what the enemy's resistance are, because you have pretty much 75% fire penetration. If you only have a 5-link setup, just take away Combustion so you can get a 6-linked armor. For my auras, I'm using Anger, Hell of Ash, and Clarity. I'm using 2 golems, which is Flame Golem and Lightning Golem, and they are both supported by Minion Life and Minion Speed. I'm using a Valve Fireball, which actually do really good damage. I'm using Fireball to poke at enemy at long range, and also doing really good damage, by the way. And it is supported by Elemental Perforation, Control Destruction, and Combustion. I'm using a Cast on Damage Taken setup, which is Cast on Damage Taken, linked to Enfeeble and Immortal Call, and they are also supported by increased duration. And finally, my movement skill, which is Lightning Warp, linked to less duration and faster casting. And that's pretty much all of my skill game. If you have any questions about my skill game, feel free to ask me in the comments. I will now show this character in action, and I thank you all for watching. If you have any questions about my build, feel free to ask me in the comments.